Smith went on First Take and was saying that the whole point of you guys doing this was to bring light to, racial oppression and whatnot. It wasn't about getting Colin. Well, he sacrificed his job, but it wasn't about getting Colin Kaepernick back in the NFL. It was about bringing light to this point, and that's what you guys have done. So he's saying, what is the problem with him going a different route because he's choosing not to go the route necessarily that you and Colin maybe have taken?
Us fighting for Colin to get a job is returning him to the status quo of being an employee. We didn't advocate for him to lose his job along the way. I think it's ludicrous that somebody who is like Stephen A., who's been so closely reporting on this, would make a statement like that. It's asinine.
Oh, caught me there, guys. Last Thursday, Stephen A. discussed Jay-Z and Roc Nation's new long-term partnership with the NFL. Eric Reid critical of Jay-Z, and Stephen A. defended the move. And Reid, as you just heard, now critical of Stephen A.'s position on doing that. Stephen A., I'm starting with you. Do you feel like he's handling this the right way, Eric?
I don't believe he's handling it. He first prefaced by saying, as I tweeted over the weekend, I'm not taking that bait. Nobody's going to pit me against Eric Reid and Colin Kaepernick. I have profound respect for Eric Reid, and I want to go out of my way in saying this. I don't think anybody, I think anybody on this planet, rather, would want a friend like Eric Reid. Because Eric Reid, talk about a brother in arms and standing behind Colin Kaepernick. My God, I mean, you talk about a rough rider and a warrior going down with the crew and not jumping ship. That's definitely Eric Reid, and he's to be applauded for that. I just disagree with this position that everybody's been taking in terms of excoriating Jay-Z and the deal with the NFL, as opposed to being a bit more inquisitive about it and finding out what he does. And one of the things that I've leaned on, Marcus, is telling folks, I remember when Denzel Washington and Spike Lee were doing Malcolm X, and Spike Lee had told me there were black people he would run into all the time. Don't mess this up. Don't mess this up. That is perfectly reasonable. They didn't go up to them and say, what the hell you doing the movie for? Man, you don't make no damn sense. Y'all ain't fit to do this. They didn't do that. What they said was don't mess it up. And I have no problem with somebody taking that position with Jay-Z, looking at him as both a strategist and a capitalist, knowing how Jay-Z can be, how he's about his money and he's about making money, and how adroit he has been at doing so. In some circles, we've spent decades revering him for that and applauding him for that. But suddenly he pulls that off here, while in the process using or attempting to use the strong arm of the National Football League to address the very things that Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reid were taking a knee for. And we want to engage in condemnation? I think that's wrong. Now, let me be very clear. I can understand from an optics perspective how looking at Jay-Z sitting next to the commissioner, smiling and laughing and yucking it up, isn't the greatest look in some people's eyes. I get that. I also get people looking at Jay-Z and saying, during that press conference, you didn't articulate a game plan that you were going to exercise and what the overall agenda was. You weren't specific enough. I get that criticism because he's too brilliant to not have details to disseminate to the masses to enlighten us about specifically what you're going to do. But that doesn't mean he's not going to do it. And when I look at Eric Reid, Marcus, I'll close by saying this. I think that somebody needs to ask Eric Reid at this particular moment in time, what exactly is he protesting about? Because if you're talking about bringing attention to racial oppression, inequality, police brutality, considering the resources that the NFL has had, and the extended tentacles that they're willing to use, along with the Players Coalition and other things that are transpiring, it seems to me that at this point in time, Eric Reid is protesting more about Colin Kaepernick than he is about the issues him and Colin Kaepernick were originally taking a knee for. And I'll stop there, Marcus.
See, here's the thing, Stephen A., and I 100% agree with what you said. first, let me preface it by saying this. Like, where I grew up at in South Baton Rouge and where I grew up at around North Baton Rouge, there's this thing called the G Code. I feel like the G Code should be a conversation between Eric Reid and Jay-Z. That's how you handle it. You have a seat at the table. You iron out these things that you just mentioned. What is the plan, Jay? And then for the criticism that Jay-Z is taking, I don't understand it. Stephen A., since the annals of history, when we start talking about Martin Luther King, when we start talking about power and infrastructure and trying to infiltrate a situation or a system that we're trying to not only gain equality, but have and be looked at as respected as the next man, whether his skin is white, whether he's from another demographic or anywhere, you have to have a seat at the table. Like there is a plan that was to kneel for social injustice, for discrimination, for black men being killed in the streets at the hands of police officers. All of that was absolutely warranted. And I don't think anybody is disagreeing with that at all. But here's the deal now. Now you have this interpersonal battle of something that I would take the side of saying this has transpired in order to push the narrative forward. I believe that's what Jay-Z is alluding to. I believe that's what he believes. I don't like the fact that it's two brothers attacking brothers over social media instead of having a conversation about what is the plan. Well, like, to look at this situation is just disheartening for me based on what Eric Reid is saying.
But Marcus, here's the thing. Jay-Z hasn't said a word about Eric Reid. He hasn't said anything but positive words about Colin Kaepernick. So the attacks have been one-sided.
Yeah.
And so now we have to get to why that is. Eric Reid went on the field at Lincoln Financial Field, all right, and tried to attack Malcolm Jenkins. For what? Because you thought he co-opted the movement. You're accusing Jay-Z of the same thing. You're alluding to sellout status being attached to him, okay? And why? It's not because we're not addressing the issues of racial oppression, police brutality, racial inequality, because the NFL, the Players Coalition is clearly making attempts to do that. And I'm not saying their work is finished and they don't need to do even more. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the NFL owners that their interests are all right and above board and they don't need to be doing more. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is that the efforts, clearly, you're talking about 9 figures plus being put into issues to address those very issues that Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reid swore they were about. But here Eric Reid is willing to attack anybody that remotely disagrees with him about Colin Kaepernick. So it seems at this moment in time that he's protesting on behalf of Colin Kaepernick more than he's protesting about oppression, inequality, police brutality, etc. And all I'm saying is if that's what you're doing, then say so and leave it at that. And stop feeling the need to attack everybody who remotely disagrees with you. Because Molly, Marcus, I'm here to tell you, who the hell would disagree with Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reid's original position? The answer is no one. We have a problem with how Eric Reid has elected to handle things publicly. And I think the brother's a good brother. His heart's in the right place. But he's better than that, and he needs to
Molly,
stop.
when we come back, I got to put you on
when you
game.
get back, you'll say something.
Execution.
But I'm sure Eric Reid's upset about his boy, who is being blackballed by the league. It's unfortunate that he doesn't have a job. But at the same time, with that being said, Jay-Z turned down the halftime where he's a laborer. Now, like you said, he has a seat at the table, and we need people to force change and be leaders in this change movement. And he's the perfect guy to do so. And he talked action, and I'm sure we'll be hearing his plan soon. Yes.
Molly, you're the host of the show. Marcus, you're the former NFL player. You now work here. Correct me if I'm wrong. Baltimore, Miami, Seattle, and Denver all were in position to offer Colin Kaepernick a job after the knee.
After the knee.
So what is this position that Eric Reid is talking about? Those are facts.
Marcus is going to respond after the break. Let's get a quick break in here, guys. The Little League World Series.